Hey, everybody, welcome back to the weekly immigration news recap, where we break down what changed in U.S. immigration this week and what signals came from the Trump administration that could impact your immigration situation if you're a foreign national, or your client strategy if you're an immigration practitioner. Today is Thursday, November 6th. It's about 11:16 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and this episode is going to be released tomorrow morning on Friday, November 7th. To recap the news with me today, I'm really lucky to be joined by Kate Kalmykov, co-chair for Global Immigration and Compliance at Greenberg Traurig. Kate, welcome, and thanks so much for making the time to recap the news with me this week. Before we jump into all the headlines, could you maybe tell folks who are listening a little bit more about your professional background, your current practice, about GT, and about the types of clients that you support?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Finn. So, my name is Kate Kalmykov. I've been at Greenberg Traurig for 20 years, and I'm fortunate enough to co chair the Global Immigration and Compliance Group there. We do the full gamut of business immigration. We work with companies from startups to Fortune 500 companies on employment based immigration, non immigrant visas, green cards, compliance, lots of I-9 and H-1B issues. We have a very robust EB-5 practice, and we also have a lobbying and litigation practice related to immigration.
All very relevant things in this day and age in the immigration landscape. I'm excited to dig into some of the EB-5 stuff with you because that's not a topic we touch on frequently in this weekly news recap. But I know you've been following all the changes that have been happening the last couple of months very closely. Um, so Kate and I are going to break down some of the most important headlines and developments in the immigration news that happened this week, primarily focused on what happened inside of the Trump administration, because with the government shutdown, Congress isn't doing a whole lot at this point. And there's not a ton of updates from the courts. So, as usual, we're focused on the rapid pace at which the Trump administration is moving on immigration policy making. Returning listeners will know that we do our best to cover as much of the new immigration news as possible, but we're going to take advantage of having Kate and her expertise here, and we're going to focus in on some of the developments where she's able to shed some light, shed some new information that maybe you all haven't heard before, a different perspective as somebody who is practicing with on the ground with Fortune 500 companies all the way down to startups and helping them in their immigration programs. So we won't hit every headline, but we will hit most of them, and we'll dive into the stuff that we think is most relevant to the listenership of this podcast, which I know is primarily practitioners. And then at the end, we're going to save just a couple of minutes, as we normally do, to look beyond the headlines and talk with Kate about a trend or a signal or a development that maybe isn't in the news this week or hasn't been the past couple of weeks, but is going to be very relevant for companies, for foreign nationals, for immigration practitioners in the coming months. So we'll get into all of that. But Kate, with all that housekeeping out of the way, you ready to jump into the news?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Go ahead and share my screen with the first story. So last Friday, we've grown very accustomed to DHS or USCIS Friday news dumps or big changes. We got one from the Department of Labor last week, and it was a piece of relatively good news. It was day 31 of the shutdown. At the time the government shut down, the government is still shut down as of November 6th. But the Department of Labor announced late last Friday that they would be resuming OFLC operations, and the flag system would be back up. That LCAs, PERM, and PWD applications for H-2A and H-2Bs and others would resume processing, and that also practitioners, companies, and others could submit new applications as well. So, Kate, walk us through what was happening with you and your team and your practice last week when this news came in, and sort of how you started to triage things for your clients.
Well, we were thrilled. During the shutdown, obviously the Department of State and USCIS have been working, and for the most part, employers haven't been impacted too badly, but they have been in terms of filing H-1Bs, E-3s, PERMs, and so have been able to resume those applications. Some issues, of course, that you need to think about is that people had expired if they hadn't initiated or filed their extension before the shutdown. And once they expired, they couldn't submit the application for the LCA with the Department of Labor because it was shut down. So now we have been able to submit those. This happened to us in the previous shutdowns, and in the past, the USCIS, once they get the certified LCA, even though they see a break in the work authorized status, has forgiven and even backdated the approval to the date when the shutdown started so that there would be no break in work authorization or status. We have obviously, because the system has just resumed, not gotten the certified LCAs yet, but we have submitted and we do anticipate and hope that USCIS will adjudicate them the same way. Although you never know, there may be changes, and it's been sort of a roller coaster ride recently, and we'll keep everyone updated if we see those changes.
This shutdown in particular, similar to others, I think we knew was sort of coming, and not necessarily like it was a certainty, but at the end of the fiscal year, at the end of September, like there were signs that this was going to happen. As somebody who has guided clients through multiple shutdowns, some where DOL is shut down like it was for 31 days here, and some where the last big shutdown in 2019 where DOL operations continued for the most part. How were you sort of guiding and preparing your clients, maybe especially those who are newer to this, who don't have global mobility leaders who have been around the block and sort of know how this stuff plays out?
Well, I think it's important to have a high touch relationship with the clients. So we are constantly sending updates to them. We're having calls. We are on call for any types of concerns and to address any of the issues. We outlined our strategy and what we would do. I think this shutdown, I hope it ends soon. I read this morning that a number of flights are canceled, although international flights are not canceled yet. Once it reaches international flights, obviously employers will be impacted by that as well because personnel travel. And so we're just keeping them updated on everything that happens related to the shutdown and the strategies that we're going to employ to file their applications.
A little bit more in the weeds on this story. Andrew Craybaum over at Bloomberg Law, with his colleague Parker Purifoy, reported sort of a little bit deeper on the Department of Labor's contingency plan that they released on sort of how they're going to bring back the staff and pay the staff in order to resume OFLC operations. I'll link the article as I always do in the show notes for people to go check out. But Andrew and Parker, they point out that over the last couple of weeks, there has been a lot of lobbying from impacted organizations, including the National Council for Agricultural Employers, for this action to happen by DOL. And it's well known that the Trump administration, in the first 9-10 months so far, has moved when the groups that are impacted by H-2A and H-2B processing delays ask them to, they're more likely to make moves and sort of dedicate resources to those two visa types. Kate, this is more speculative, but just, as a practitioner who's working with, through H-1Bs and PERMs, every single day and has been over the last 10 months of this new Trump administration, have you seen any changes at all in DOL processing for H-1Bs? Have you noticed any changes?
Not really. I would say it's remained pretty consistent. But I will tell you that this article you referenced, the lobbying certainly makes sense to me because I represent a number of farms
Mm.
and they have lost a lot of eligible employees or are about to because of the termination of some of the TPS designations. And so, for example, Haitians really do a lot of the labor on farms. So that explains why the H2 program is so important to them and why they were lobbying for the DOL to resume processing, because that would have completely just upset business operations.
One thing that we're tracking very, very closely at Lawfully, and I wrote about this in my newsletter last week, is how the 31-day shutdown of LCAs is going to increase the volume that USCIS is going to need to process in November. So just a little background on it. Again, I'll link it for folks in the show notes, but a little bit of background on it. On average, USCIS receives and adjudicates anywhere between 30 and 35,000 H-1B petitions per month. That's been the standard for a very long time at this point. That's just the flow that they have planned for, and they're able to do so quite effectively. During the cap season, obviously, around May and June, they plan for a big influx of H-1B petitions, and they allocate, adjudicators to make sure that they can meet the demand and adjudicate those petitions in a timely fashion. But there's been a 31-day shutdown of LCAs. Kate, I'm sure this is what it looks like inside of your practice as well. A lot of extensions and transfers that weren't able to move forward because you didn't have the certified LCA. You filed those LCAs. As soon as you get the certification back, you and every other immigration practitioner will be filing all of those backlog cases. Estimates would be that means that USCIS is going to receive double the number of H-1Bs in November, maybe spread out a little bit through December, that they typically do. And whether or not they've contingency plans to deal with that surge is unknown. The holidays add another wrinkle to that with Thanksgiving and then the Christmas holidays coming up. And we know from a lot of the former USCIS folks that we consult with that November and December is when a lot of adjudicators take their take their PTO before it expires on them. So Kate, I'm just curious, is this something that you've sort of factored in with your clients? Do most of your clients file H's with premium processing? Are they expecting quick adjudications, or do you have any that are filing regular processing just as part of their company policy and might expect some delays?
Well, this is a great point. And I think when we're counseling clients and when we sent our notifications on Friday, we told them first to anticipate delays with the Department of Labor because they have a lot of catch up to do first. And let's see how quickly they process everything for it to even get to USCIS first. But yes, most of our clients tend to premium process H's. People have upcoming holiday travel. They want to plan, they want to be able to go home. And now, as you know, earlier this year, the Department of State issued guidance that you have to process for a new visa if you need it in your home country. And depending on what your home country is, that may also be a lengthy wait. So, with holiday travel coming up, these are all things that both employees and employers need to plan for.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, moving on to the next story here. And this came out late last week / earlier this week as well. There's sort of two components of it. The first is an article from Newsweek here that I'll quickly go over, Kate, and then we'll talk about the CBP component of it and sort of talk about the broader trend. But DHS proposed a new rule. The text came out that would expand biometrics collection for all individuals applying for immigration benefits. And that could include DNA testing in some circumstances, according to the proposed rule. And one of the big takeaways here that I've seen, and I'd love to hear if you sort of picked anything else out of the rule when you were reviewing it for your clients, is that there's going to some of the age exceptions that existed before will no longer exist if this rule goes through. And there will be a lot more individuals who need to do biometrics in order for their case to move forward. And the obvious, well-known ramifications of that are backlogs and another sort of thing that could influence or cause more backlogs. And then this is from you all at Greenberg Traurig from a couple of weeks ago, but CBP is also expanding biometrics collection as well for new entries into the U.S. So across the board, the government is expanding biometrics for foreign nationals in the U.S. Kate, sort of what's your reaction to this? How have you been talking about it with your clients, and how are you helping them prepare for these changes?
I think clients are ready for it. Many of them come from countries that already have something similar in place, and it falls in line with the administration's push towards modernization, using technology more, and focusing on security and trying to cut down immigration fraud, the use of fraudulent documents, etc. One thing that I found really interesting about the CBP announcement is we don't have an exit system, when you leave the US, you don't do an exit immigration check, but now they want to institute this biometric requirement. So that will be interesting to see how it's implemented and if they are going to start stamping passports at exit or even considering doing something like that. I'm guessing that won't come anytime soon due to resources and reducing overall operations, but I do think it's probably on the horizon. And the administration is concerned with overstays. We saw the visa bond program initiated also several months ago. So it may be something that's coming down the pike and that we should monitor.
You will know more about this than me, it sounds like, but, any intel on how that might impact, like, I-94 records? And again, I mentioned before we hopped on the call, like, I was an immigration paralegal, and sometime if you were doing recapture for an H-1B or, for whatever reason, you needed to include the I-94 entry/exit record, in a petition, right? It was not always the most reliable way to show how many days an individual's in the country. Do you think that might be a component of this new initiative by CBP?
I'm not sure it's tied to the I-94. I think it's tied to security. And you're absolutely right. The I-94 online system is not reliable, is often missing information. But I do see a trend overall in the government starting to use AI, talking to different agencies about AI, gathering information through AI. And I am optimistic that in the next year or two, we will really see a large scale revamp and improvement of the technology.
Okay. The next story I was excited to get into with you, and we'll use this as a conduit for those who are watching, but I would love to just talk about broader EB-5 trends with you, Kate, as somebody who works with clients who are applying for EB-5 and going through that process. But this is your article from a couple of weeks ago on the Greenberg Traurig website about EB-5 filing fees being set to decrease under a new USCIS fee rule. So maybe unpack this one first, and then this development, and then talk more about what you're seeing in the EB-5 landscape in November of 2025.
Yeah, so this was a nice article to publish because usually I am spreading bad news in the immigration space. And for the first time, I had something positive to update people on. But there's a proposed rule to reduce the EB-5 USCIS filing fees. So, under the Administrative Procedures Act, USCIS has to set filing fees in accordance with how much time they spend reviewing an application, how much time they spend on adjudications. And so when the Reform and Integrity Act was introduced in 2022, it also at the same time we saw this sharp increase in EB-5 filing fees across the board for individual investors, through the 526, through the 829, and for regional centers and projects. I mean, it was really high. If you want to submit a new project approval, $48,000. If you want to file an amendment, $48,000. That's pretty steep. So this rule looks like they have reevaluated how much time they're spending internally on the review of EB-5 documents, and they are set to reduce the fees. It's not in effect yet. We have 60 days for notice and comment, but I'm optimistic that it will be introduced. And this comes at a really great time because the Reform and Integrity Act allows grandfathering of EB-5 petitions until September 30th, 2026. After September 30th, 2026, the program is extended until September 30th, 2027. But after the September 30th, 2026 date, investors aren't grandfathered and the price of the program has to be adjusted for inflation. So many investors, we expect hundreds, if not thousands, are going to submit their EB-5 petitions before the September 30th, 2026 date to get in under the $800,000 fee. And if they file in time, they can also get this reduction in filing fees. So that's very advantageous for people and comes at a good time. Projects are also likewise now rushing to submit their documents because they want to take advantage of this investor rush that's coming. And so if they can take advantage of this, it will be a significant cost savings for them.
Yeah, all very fascinating and definitely a shifting landscape. What else has sort of in the last 10 months changed in the EB-5 landscape? I know there was some visa bulletin retrogressions. I can't remember how long ago that were disappointing to a lot of folks. What's sort of the status of that?
Oh, there's been so much news on the EB-5 space, and we can probably do an entire podcast on
Right.
that or a series of podcasts. We actually don't have visa retrogression yet for cases filed under the RIA and post RIA. So this is good news, especially for Chinese and Indians. This is still the fastest way for them to get a green card in the United States. And the RIA introduced concurrent filing, which we didn't have before. So many H-1Bs are looking to the EB-5. If I'm an Indian in the EB-2, I'm waiting decades to get my green card. So this way I can probably get it in a year and a half to 2 years. And even if retrogression comes, which it is expected to, but somehow visa issuance just doesn't get to the rate that it needs to in order for retrogression to take effect. So if I'm someone in the US filing an adjustment of status, I will get my green card probably in a year and a half, sometimes even a year. If you're investing into an approved rural project, you can expect your 526 to be adjudicated within 3 to 6 months. And this is something I really have to give to the Trump administration. In EB-5 and in other categories, processing of applications has really not slowed down. If anything, it has really increased, in productivity since the Biden administration. They have been issuing decisions quickly. One of the notable things that we have seen a change in just in the last month is the USCIS acceptance of installment funding. So the regulations say for EB-5, you can be invested or in the process of investing. So what does that mean? It means I don't have to invest my full 800,000 when I file my EB-5 application. I can invest a portion and then document to the service that I am investing, my second, third, fourth installment by the time the EB-5 petition is approved. Although technically under the 829 regulations, even at the time of I-526 approval, I don't have to be fully invested, although that's a little risky, and we usually tell clients not to do that. Now it seems that the service hasn't published guidance, but in adjudication trends, we're seeing that they're denying installment funding, saying that now you should have proactively interfiled proof of your subsequent installments. Not that they should have issued an RFE, which is what under USCIS procedure they should do, request that information, and what they have done to date, but that the petitioners need to proactively file. Of course, when you proactively file an interfiling to the USCIS, you're sending it off to a mailroom staffed by contractors. There's no barcode or anything, so maybe it'll make it to the file, maybe it won't, nobody knows. So it's really a silly requirement, and I think many practitioners that are seeing these denials are filing appeals right now to the AAO, and we're hoping that the AAO will shed some, common sense on this and send it back to the USCIS and reopen the cases. If they don't, then we can expect federal court litigation.
Earlier this year, there was some pressure being mounted by a handful, not all, but a handful or a wing of, I think, sort of the MAGA intelligentsia on the immigration policy front, to sort of push the Trump administration, and I think they were hopeful with the announcement of the gold card would be some sort of replacement or uh, effectively decrease the opportunity for EB-5 applicants. And these folks typically, and I've spoken with many of them, they point out issues that they claim exist within the EB-5 program in terms of fraud, but also just the way the program is set up, in their disagreements with it. It seems like with the proclamation from September, and what we know so far, that the EB-5 is not going to be touched uh, as part of the Gold Card initiative, and that overall, from what you're saying, the EB-5 program has uh, been, stable, if not moving in a more efficient direction so far under the Trump administration. So, what's your prognosis? What do you tell clients in terms of like the political wins when it comes to the EB-5 over the next couple of years? So far, does it seem like it's still a strong pathway for folks, or do you think there are still concerns due to some of the pressures from detractors of the program?
Great question. So, the president can't cancel the EB-5 program. It's an act of Congress, and only Congress can repeal acts of Congress. So, as I said, we're extended to September 30th, 2027. What happens after that point, my crystal ball is not clear at this time, but the president can't cancel EB-5. And I think he was advised of that after the initial announcements that were made back in February. And so when the newest proclamation about the gold card and now the platinum card came out, it's not part of the EB-5 category. The way it's written in the proclamation is that it's going to take numbers from the EB-1, which is your extraordinary ability aliens, your outstanding researchers or professors, and your multinational managers or executives from the EB-1 category, and EB-2, which is your national interest waivers and people with an advanced degree. That's very interesting. We'll unpack that in a minute. But I do want to say, with concerns about fraud, this was a huge issue that was addressed in the Reform and Integrity Act. Absolutely, there was fraud in the EB-5 program. I think a lot of, when you're talking about raising a lot of money at low interest, it does attract bad faith actors. And Congress really took that issue up in 2022, and they introduced a lot of integrity measures into the RIA. So right now, if you're raising funds under the EB-5 program, you have to disclose to investors the brokers that you're paying and how much. Every raise has to use a fund administrator or get audited financials. The USCIS does site visits of projects to determine progress and how money is used. An annual compliance filing has to be filed detailing how money is being spent. These are big, you know, commercial real estate projects. So they include thousands of pages of requisitions to document every penny and how it's spent and how it moves. So I think we have really seen in the past 3 years a reduction in fraud and a lot of consumer confidence in the EB-5 program. I still think the EB-5 program for the people that can afford it is one of the fastest ways to a green card. It allows you to self-sponsor. You're not relying on an employer. You're not relying on a family member. And it's a great way for people who otherwise can't come or can't stay that are already here to apply. We see a lot of parents gifting their adult children EB-5 money because they went to school here, they want to stay here, and it is so difficult to get an H-1B these days. So back to the gold card and EB-1, EB-2. People are not talking about this at all right now, but I do definitely think this is going to be a hot button issue because, as I said, China and India, EB-2 is extremely backlogged. I think once employers realize that numbers are being taken from those employees to give them a gold card or a platinum card, that we will also see federal court litigation on that issue. And the EB-1 category has also been backlogged, not as much as EB-2, but again, for in nationals of India, for example, it is backlogged and the EB-5 is faster. It's also interesting to think about who will want to do the gold card or the platinum card. So the biggest consumers of EB-5 are China and India historically. And that's why I keep bringing them up, because to them it makes sense. They have a very educated, very large population, and so they use up their quota in the other employment-based categories, so EB-5 becomes attractive. Now you have a new program which will not give you returns, which does not give you your money back. It's a donation to the Department of Commerce, and it's initially going to go through the Department of Commerce before it goes to USCIS when you apply according to the proclamation. But who's going to use it? Probably if you're Chinese or Indian, it's not as attractive to you as the EB-5 category because you're going to face the delays that you would if your employer filed a PERM for you. So that'll be interesting to see.
You preempted a lot of the questions I was going to ask, but that last point you brought
I'm
up about
sorry for
no,
stealing your
no, no,
thunder.
it's perfect. You went more efficient that way. But I want to follow up on sort of the who component for the potential gold card. Obviously, currently the details are still fairly sparse about the actual implementation of the process for applying and obtaining a gold card. But you obviously talk with many, current EB-5 applicants or prospective EB-5 applicants, folks who are maybe planning, getting the money together, coming up with the resources they need to pursue that pathway. How many of them are waiting and seeing on the gold card and maybe moving their resources to that if they think it might be a faster option versus just continuing their preparation for the EB-5 pathway? What are the vibes, I guess, for lack of a better question?
I think there is interest in the gold card. So I will tell you that there are certain people that don't use the EB-5, and those are typically your very high net worths. They're not interested in coming to the US and paying worldwide tax. They're just
Right.
not. Sorry. So there is interest from that community in taking advantage of a gold or platinum card because it seems if we do the platinum card the way the proclamation is drafted, there might be some tax breaks if you spend up to 270 or 280 days a year in the country. So that becomes attractive to people, for example, from the Middle East, right? GCC nationals pay no tax in the GCC, so they're not interested to come to the US if they have to pay tax. If they don't have to pay tax, that's a game changer for them. I think there's also people that see the EB-5 requirements of documenting a source of funds as challenging because they come from countries where they have a cash economy. Maybe they don't file returns, they're not required to. And so for the EB-5, that's very challenging because it is a very rigorous application in terms of documenting where your investment money comes from. I think there is a perception that the gold card or platinum card won't focus on that as much because you're making a donation. I tend to personally disagree with that. I think the government still is going to want clean money coming into the country and they're going to definitely vet it. But that is the perception right now in the market. And I definitely think that EB-5 and gold card, once it's implemented, can exist side by side.
Sure. One more question for me on the EB-5 front. It's harkening back to some news that was, a top headline a couple of months ago, and now most of us have forgotten about. But Joseph Edlow, the USCIS director, I think it was back at the end of August or early September, talked about this new force, very small, but about 100 individuals who would be at USCIS working effectively as enforcement officers, investigators. Again, sparse on the details of what they would actually be doing, but from what you've gathered, and from what from what you've gathered, any concern that the sort of new enforcement initiatives, the new enforcement push by USCIS could increase scrutiny on EB-5 applications at any point in the process?
No, not really. And as I said, there's already a compliance filing, there's a site visit component. I think what the new force is really aimed at is combating visa fraud and investigating I-9 compliance. And I think if you look at the Facebook page and the Instagram of USCIS, which is funny to say out loud, but it's true, if you look at the posts over the last 10 months, they are all really focused on enforcement, on combating fraud. And USCIS, since it was, created when the INS was dissolved, ICE was the enforcement arm, USCIS was the benefits arm. And the tune and the verbiage has really changed to USCIS being now an enforcement focused agency in granting benefits.
Yeah, it is fascinating for those who don't pay attention to the USCIS social media feeds, but it's interesting. It's very focused on like individual fraud that they catch, or individuals that maybe go to a field office for an interview, who they find have a criminal record or something like that. It's thus far it hasn't been. There haven't been any. There was that raid in Minneapolis a couple weeks ago or a month ago or so that Ed Loos did a press conference at. But I do know a little. I teased this on the last podcast from last week, and I'll just tease it again. In the next couple of months, I know I know that the agencies are working on a multi-agency big announcement that they got a big fish. I'll just say that. So that's definitely in the works in the government. They want to go beyond just celebrating the individual fraud that they're stopping and politically
I
show off that they're going after bigger fish too.
Yeah, I think this is the time for employers to become compliant. And, employers always tell me, we got the I-9s, don't worry about it. And yeah, you need to worry about it right now because if there is one little thing wrong, they will ding you, they can charge you, they raise the fees, and they're coming after you. And, we can see them also coming after people that maybe are doing the right thing based on the advice that they're getting in terms of what visas they're using to bring employees over or whether for short term assignments they're using B1s or ESTAs for certain activities. And I think employers really now need to document if they are going to use those programs, why they're authorized to use those programs, or to even review other visa alternatives. Maybe look at part time E2s just to give themselves peace of mind that they're not going to be a target in an investigation. And if
Yeah.
they are investigated, that they have the necessary documentation in place and are working with counsel to have a response ready and, a rapid response mechanism in place to handle that type of investigation.
We'll have to plug some of your articles. I know you write, and you have I don't know if it's your podcast or if you just are a guest sometimes, but I know you talk about these compliance issues in detail as new developments come out. So we'll make sure to plug that at the end and put it in the show notes so folks can go and
Thank you.
that's a whole again talk about a topic where we could do a whole other series of podcasts on just the
Yes.
compliance implications for employers and individuals of everything that's happening right now and the whole amalgamation of it.
And
Kate, there was
that brings us also back to our starting topic of DOL. The
yeah.
DOL audits are also really going to vamp up under Project Firewall.
Yeah,
And just wait, that's really coming.
it very much is. It yes, 100%. Anyone who I've been shouting this from the rooftops since before they even announced it. I think most people are taking it seriously right now, but if you aren't, I don't like to fearmonger, but Project Firewall is the real deal. It's not a it is not a an announcement that doesn't have weight behind it. Kate, the last topic I just wanted to talk with you about because we really at this point can't go through a podcast without talking about the current status and the sort of future of the $100,000 H-1B fee. Again, Andrew Krabaum from Bloomberg Law did an article just looking at and talking with startups and early stage tech companies and sort of how they're thinking and approaching the current existence of the $100,000 H-1B fee. Oftentimes, startups are trying to get folks to come over from different countries. It's not always necessarily individuals who went to school here are on an F1 and can change status and not be impacted by this fee. So I'm just curious to pick your brain as somebody who works with startups, early stage companies, as well as the bigger Fortune 500 companies that have established global mobility programs and SOPs to deal with things like this. What have been the conversations that you've been having around this $100,000 fee and sort of the wait and see versus proactive planning approaches that are on the menu or on the table right now?
Well, now we know that it is going to apply to those overseas. So that is good news because initially there was a lot of fear that it would apply to people who are already in the US. And so I think startups now need to really look at F1s on OPT in their hiring and, think about eventually doing H-1Bs for them as a change of status in country. Their ability and it's only for the next year. Let's keep that in mind. It's a one-year proclamation. We don't know if it's going to be extended. But their ability to recruit talent from overseas on an H-1B is just going to be cost prohibitive. So we need to also look to see whether, one, they can open business operations overseas. And depending on the country where the person is located, it may be very friendly and easy to do so. A lot of countries have digital nomad visas. A lot of countries have favorable employment laws. Europe are notoriously pro-employee, but other locations are really trying to attract talent and foreign companies opening operations. So it's important to get a team in place, not just on the immigration side, but on the employment and tax side too, to really take those into account. And maybe sometimes you want to hire the person overseas, and if you don't want them to be based there forever, consider bringing them back in on an L-1B or another type of visa. So that is something that we're exploring with employers. Another thing a lot of people aren't talking about, but it's establishing training programs for a company or working with a J1 sponsoring organization, because if somebody's truly entry level, you can bring them in on a trainee visa, get 18 months, and then we'll see where things are at that point.
Yeah, all very sage advice. Well, Kate, that was all the news I wanted to cover this week. There's definitely more, but we'll stop it there for time. But I really appreciate you making the time to do this and cover everything. This has been very illuminative, and you had a lot of great insight to share. So I really appreciate it. I know our listeners will too. Before we go, tell folks where they can follow your work. I know you put out content frequently on LinkedIn. What are the best places to follow your insights and your ideas?
Absolutely. So follow me on LinkedIn. Uh, we at GT have two immigration blogs, EB5insights.com and InsideBusinessImmigration.com. I also host my own podcast through the firm, which is linked on both blogs, and it is called Immigration Insights.
Are you
Thank you
guys
so much for having me.
I saw it was like it was marketed as a limited series. Are you guys going to continue it because there's so much to cover, or is it
Yes,
eventually
we're
okay?
at episode 20,
Okay,
and I think it's now the most viewed podcast for the firm, so it is definitely continuing.
amazing. That's great. Well, we'll put all the links to all of that in the show notes so folks can go check it out. Kate, thank you so much. We'll have to have you back on again soon and deep dive on some of the other topics we teased today.
Thank you.